Hello, welcome to Historical Airsoft. Today we'll be taking a look at the CM048, CYMA's full stock version of the AK-74. I purchased this rifle on eBike for $135. Screaming deal as far as I'm concerned, especially considering the quality of the externals on this thing that I really was not expecting. So let's jump into this review. The first thing I'd like to point out is how good this thing looks from the outside. When I went into this purchase, I was not expecting this amount of external quality. The wood is absolutely amazing looking. Usually, airsoft guns on websites, they'll post whichever one that they have that has the best looking wood, and wood often comes in really weird colors, but this stuff has held up nice. I've taken this to quite a few games so far to test it out before I did this review, and I'm a huge fan of that. The steel on the receiver and the upper receiver is amazing quality. Again, it really seems like something that would be worth a lot more than $135. Moving along down the front of the rifle, again, everything matches that great quality steel. Nothing feels like it moves at all, besides the magazine and some other parts that are to be expected. But this thing is rock solid. Usually CYMA is known for its lower quality, lower priced, entry-level guns, which this thing actually matches the price point of very well. So I'm very surprised at the quality that they're able to put out for this thing at $135. Awesome job. So just going over some basics. So of course you have the magazine release. This is a high cap magazine. It's supposed to represent Bakelite. This is probably one of the weaker points on the gun in terms of the external quality. You can tell it's it's made of fairly flimsy plastic. Of course it rattles a lot, as do all high cap magazines. There's seam marks that are very obvious. So, nothing's too special. You have the fire selector switch with 1 down for full auto and 2 down for semi-automatic. I also really love the way that the spring for the bolt looks on the inside of this rifle. Of course, it has no real purpose or function, but it looks pretty good. When it comes to the actual bolt, it's a CYMA AK. Again, it's nothing special. It gets the job done. You just open that up to reveal your hop-up unit. Hop-up seems to work well. The upper receiver cover, I'm a huge fan of. They gave it it looks just like an original would, an original AK-74, and I'm a huge fan of it. It really feels like if you had to put a battery under there, it should be no problem. And CYMA does have other versions of this gun that have folding stocks and no room for the battery in there, so I wouldn't be all too worried about that aspect of it if you were to get another version of this gun. So above the AK-74, now we have a really old AK-47 by CYMA. This thing has been completely beat and bashed to shit, used all the time. This is one of the guns that my friend group has on for whenever we want to bring a new friend out and don't really have a gun to loan them. But this thing, the only reason I'm bringing this out, while it might be an unfair comparison due to its being used so much, is the price point. The one up top was about $120, and this one I got for $135. So for a $15 difference, I think it's a hell of a difference, if you ask me. One more thing that I forgot to mention is the AK-74 I did get on sale, and if you wanted to get it with a battery off of eBike, it would be $180. But if you're not worried about if you already have your own batteries and don't worry about that, and don't have to worry about that, again, it would only be about $135. It's still on sale and doesn't look like it's going to come down from sale anymore. Starting at the rear of the gun, we have the removable butt plate to reveal the battery compartment. And this thing is relatively spacious. It's very long, so for a longer battery it should be fine, but at the same time it doesn't give any room for a brick or anything. If you do want to use anything, it would be a stick battery. The battery I use in this gun is a Titan Power 2600 milliamp 7.4 volt battery, and these batteries are absolutely amazing. I couldn't recommend them more. I'll leave a link to Titan Power's website as well as their YouTube channel in the description below. So the stock is attached to a piece of metal, which then is attached to the inside of the upper receiver. You can see right there. I have seen some examples of this breaking. I have had no problems with it yet, and the stock is in there real tight. And if it does start to loosen, all that would need to fix it is to unscrew that, put some Loctite on it, and stick it back together. The selector switch is nice and crisp. I'm a huge fan of it in terms of, The grip is made of plastic, and it feels really good. It doesn't feel out of place at all. Not a cheap plastic trying to represent anything it's not supposed to be. The trigger is, I really like the rounded trigger, the feeling that you get on these older style Soviet weapons. The magazine release is, again, it's relatively simple. It's nothing special, but it does get the job done, and it does its job well. The wood I've already talked about. I'm a huge fan of. The rear sight has lettering or numbers on it for corresponding for 100 meters. So, and then you can adjust as you can on a real one, forward for more elevation and backwards for less. The barrel is, I'm not sure how to describe it. It has little ribs in it. They're very hard, very small, and not very easy to pick up on this iPhone camera, but you get the basic idea. It has a nice AK-74 muzzle brake on it. It came with the federally mandated orange tip, but where I live here in Utah, there's no law against removing it, and my thought process is the only place this is ever going to see the light of day is either inside my house or at a designated airsoft field, so there's little chance of having any run-in with the police or anyone calling the police or anything like that. So you just, when it comes to removing or painting over orange tips, just do what makes sense for where you are and where you're living. So, you know, we hear too much of little kids getting in trouble and shit for running around with airsoft guns and looking like real guns. I personally am a huge fan of the weight on this rifle. It's not necessarily light, but it's not necessarily heavy either. It does have a little bit of weight to it, so it really feels like you're holding something, especially when it comes to the more reenacting or historical side of airsoft. Having a heavier gun, I'm always a big fan of. You know, some people aren't a big fan of that, but it shouldn't be that big of a problem because it's not necessarily all too heavy at the same time. The reason I purchased this rifle was to complete my East German military kit, or the National Volksarmee. So the East Germans did not have AK-74s in specific, they had their own variant of it. So the East German variant of it was the MPI K-74. MPI standing for Machine Pistole and K for Kalashnikov, and it's kind of interesting because machine pistol, or you know, is basically the German word for a submachine gun, and this is not much of a submachine gun. So originally I was a little bit confused by that, but by doing more research I was able to figure out that the reason that they wanted to use machine pistol is because they wanted to avoid using the words Sturmgewehr, which is the assault rifle, storm rifle, which is the name given to the STG-44 or the MP-44, whatever you want to call it, which was Nazi Germany's late war assault weapon, and is widely considered to be the first assault rifle. So the name MPIK ends up standing for Kalashnikov type short machine gun, which is a very interesting name, but the East Germans were very interesting people. So the East German version of this gun was notably different in a couple of different ways and reasons, but of course there's no airsoft version for them. I've seen some people who have gotten original East German furnishings to put on their CYMA AKs and other AK builds, which could be a super interesting project someday. So of course, one major thing that you can point out is on the selector switch, there's the Russian lettering for fire, or for safe, semi, and full auto. Of course, on the East German, there was German lettering for the same thing. The East Germans also had different material for the handguard and the stock. It was a polymer type of material that was painted brown and had little divots, or not divots, little dimples on it for grip, like little dots. It's very interesting looking. They did not use Bakelite for their magazines. They used another kind of plastic compound. I'm not entirely sure what it is. The East Germans, of course, adopted the MPI K-74 in 1984, so quite a bit later than when when the USSR had its own versions of the AK-74 released. East Germany, while it did have a very high military budget, it was mainly bringing in most of its new technology and things from the Soviet Union. A lot of Eastern Bloc countries during the Cold War had their own licenses to build Soviet weapons within their countries. East Germany was no different, and they made their own small changes onto each one as well for their own needs and for easier means of production inside the East German factories. The East Germans, of course, long before they had this, had their own version of the AK-47, which was the MPIK-M, kind of like the AKM. There was also one very early on, the MPIK-47, so on and so forth. There was also a version of the AK-74, or the East German AK-74 with a folding stock, but unlike the normal Russian folding stocks that you'll see come underneath, like you would see on an MP40, for example. They had one that would fold over the side, which is very interesting, which you don't really see on AKs very often at all. Overall, I'm a big fan of this rifle. One thing that you'll see a lot when it comes to airsoft reviews, especially airsoft reviews by newer channels like I am, smaller channels, is they'll seem to give whatever gun they're reviewing a lot more praise than it really deserves. But I think that this thing is, it's a lot more than I expected when I forked over 130 bucks for it. That's for sure. It does have its flaws. Of course, it's no master at long range. Of course, just as you'd expect. The gearbox is a version 3. It's nothing special. The rate of fire is fine with the battery I have in it. Again, it's nothing special. The internals of this gun overall are nothing special. Overall, the gun is nothing special. The only thing that really made me quite happy with this gun and made me get a lot more from it than I originally thought was the quality of the externals for the money that I paid. If you're brand new to airsoft, maybe you want to build a Soviet loadout, East German loadout, this thing is excellent for that. It is, you know, it's cheap, it'll get any job done, and it's perfect beginner gun that's not going to break on you anytime soon. So I would definitely recommend this rifle to anyone building a historical loadout based off of an Eastern Bloc country of the Cold War, late Cold War. Alright, so we're going to do a shooting test of the CM048 AK-74. So right now we have the 7.4 milliamp, or 7.4 volt 2600 milliamp battery by Titan Power that I showed you earlier. So here's semi-automatic, fully automatic. Unfortunately, the problem with high cap magazines is you do have to wind them a lot. Thanks for watching Historical Airsoft. I'll leave a link to this gun in the description below. Keep your eyes out for more content coming down the pipeline. You guys have a nice day.